the reason that I'm doing this show is because I'm looking at Pyle from a European perspective, and I'm seeing in his work all these references to European art.
And how long have you been working on this particular project?
Minimum 3 years, yeah.
So it's been in the works because obviously the Centennial was coming up, so people...
Oh yeah. The point is to show that he was working using all the sorts of stylistic stratagems that artists who were working in the fine arts were as well. So he was completely aware of and competent to work in a way that fine artists were, but he just wasn't. He doesn't get that credit today. Sadly, he's very clearly classified as an illustrator, an American illustrator, working at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. And because of that, unless you're an illustration aficionado or a scholar, you know, he's not in the history of art. He's not in history of art books. So that's part of what this exhibition is about, to kind of, I mean, to sort of reinsert him in the history of art. I mean, no artist, illustrator or fine artist, is working without looking at what all his contemporaries are doing. There was a shift in the attitude towards illustrators, partially because of the advent of photography, but also that there was the commercial connotations of being an illustrator sort of somehow made it less than the sort of genius fine artist working in his studio creating single masterpieces, you know, and I think that that whole shift took place during Pyle's lifetime. When he was working in Philadelphia and New York early on, he was working with lots of artists who straddled that division between illustration and fine art, Edward Austin Abbey and others like him. And they just made that transition into fine art, and Pyle chose not to. The three themes are Visions of the Past, which deals with his history paintings from sort of classical times to his present. And then there's a section called America, Past and Present, which just deals with either American history paintings or American contemporary scenes. And then a whole section on fantasy and fairy tale, because so much of Pyle's work was for children or dealt in this sort of fictional world.
I've been working on this show, well, at least the show's been in the pipeline for a couple years, so. Or probably longer than that. It's different in different institutions, but a preparator essentially is the one who handles the artwork, prepares the work for the exhibit, and then is installing the work during the exhibit. We did have a designer on this show that we brought in. They actually work with myself and the curator to design the show, and then I'm kind of here to engineer it all. You know, he kind of dreams how he wants it to be with these walls and these huge, blow-up pictures and, decks and all sorts of stuff. And it's my job to make that into reality.
Finally, at the end of his life, when he got really interested in mural painting, he went to Italy to study there. And this really reflects that kind of Beaux Arts tradition that was going on at the end of the century, beginning of the 20th century. These were done for his own home, because he wanted to break into the mural painting. It was kind of mural painting was big in public spaces, and this was, I think, a way for him to have an example of his work for prospective clients. We have to edit because we're trying to tell a story with a limited amount of space, despite the size of this gallery. And so this was just to give people a kind of a hint, and also it ends the exhibition. It sort of shows that towards the end of his life he was moving on in new directions.